everybody, this is the Sliders Review. I'm here today to talk about Black History Month. The month that is a celebration of my people, because I am a black man and everything. And it's about all our accomplishments, all the oppression that we have gone through over like centuries of living in like America and stuff like that. And even till this day, we are still being oppressed. And so I'm here today to talk to you about certain characters or TV shows or episodes that revolve around Black History Month that I personally enjoy. So I'm here today to talk to you about Highlander, the TV series, Season 2, episode Run for Your Life, and Season 4, Manhunt. So this deals with the Black Immortal Carl Robertson. Now, Highlander is a show I've been wanting to talk about for a very long time, but I just haven't had time to do it. And also because I haven't necessarily seen the entire series. See, when I started many years back in the 90s, I started with the third season. The third all the way up into like the fifth. And I stopped halfway into the fifth. I'm just like, the show has changed like a lot. Like McLeod's not even fighting nobody with his sword. It hasn't even had his quickening. So what the world's going on? So that started irritating me. So by that time, of course, this was the 90s and they didn't do reruns and Highlander was in syndication. So I didn't know anything of like the first or second season. So this is why like this video doesn't deal with like Charlie, who is like a half black, half Italian man on the show. Because I'm still unfamiliar with like the second season. So like when Charlie showed up, because like in the third and fourth season, I don't remember seeing Charlie like at all. But then he showed up in the fourth season all of a sudden. And then they killed this character off. So I'm like, who is this dude? But then when the 2000s came around and Spike TV used to have like tons of like Highlander episodes, I finally got to see parts of the first and second season. I haven't seen them all, but I saw a good number of them. I don't like the first season whatsoever. The first season is very strange, but the show got better in the second when they introduced the Watchers, which is one of the best things they introduced because they was never in the movie series. And so I remember seeing Charlie in the second season. I'm like, oh, so he is in this show. And so I'm guessing they added Charlie in the second season for diversity. Because if you know anything about Highlander, the movies, or Highlander, the TV show, they're predominantly white. I can only recall probably 3 episodes that deal with like an Asian like character. And when episodes that don't have Charlie in them, I can only think of 2 that have to do with a black man, or a black person, I should say. And so, of course, in the second season, there's tons of black people because there is Charlie. But other than that, everybody on the show is pretty much white. And every Immortal you see is white. So that's probably why they introduced Charlie in the second season. Now, the reason why I picked these, of course, because Black History Month, which has passed, but I'm still doing a few videos and stuff until I finish the shows that I remember watching. And in this episode, Carl Robertson, which is a take on Jackie Robinson, the famous black baseball player. And so, like, that's where his name comes from. And I remember when I used to watch this back in the day and I saw Charlie. See, here's the thing. Like I said before, I never saw the second season. So I just now saw Run for Your Life, like just recently. And I have to say, Carl's personality, like, it's weird. His personality and McLeod's personality are almost completely different. Like these two, like, okay, so Carl was first introduced in season 2. And then he came back in season 4. And his personality and his purpose has somewhat changed. Like his whole vibe is slightly different. The only thing that's consistent is that he has an attitude and he sees that white America still puts down black America. That's the only thing that's consistent. Everything else, his relationship with McLeod and everything else, it seems different and changed, and their personalities and vibes are different. It's almost like in season 4 they did a small, like, soft reboot of his character and everything. They still have that flashback scene from season 2 when him and McLeod met, but they added a new one. They shown now how Carl became an immortal, and it's like, yeah, it's like that's that part where he became an immortal that should have been um shown in season 2, but it never was. So it feels like they kind of wanted to, like, and then also in season 2 he didn't have much of a story arc other than him just hating on, like, white people and white cops and stuff. And so they I guess they wanted to change that a little bit, but they kept some of the aspects of his personality and his upbringings and stuff. So it is a continuation of that episode, but it feels like that of a soft reboot. Even McLeod's personality towards him is slightly different in this episode, or in season 4, that is. And it's just kind of strange and bizarre. Now, like I said before, one interesting thing about Carl was that he was an eye opener for me. See, when you watch the Highlander series, like I said before, it is predominantly white. Every immortal is white, except for this one Asian immortal I remember. And so, like, and then there's also this other black immortal, but he had a small role avenging, like, his lover or his best friend, whichever the one it was. I wasn't really sure. But yeah, it's like when you see this, it's kind of like, oh, I never stopped to think about what a black immortal went through for, like, many centuries and everything. And Carl's at least, about 200 years old and stuff. And so, like, you gotta stop and think, because he was born a slave and everything. And I never stopped to think about what black immortals went through when they lived in, like, parts of the world that had, like, slavery and stuff. And this really shows what Carl went through. He had the downside of being immortal and living forever and everything, as opposed to, say, like, a white immortal who lived a life of, like, luxury and stuff. He had the struggle, and for the majority of his life, even though he was always a slave and stuff. And then when he wasn't a slave, he was still being hunted down by the clan and everything. And it's a real eye opener and something you don't really think about when watching this series and stuff. And I really wish they would see, if it was made today, you would saw more of that. You would saw more of the struggles of, like, black immortals, Hispanic immortals, Asian immortals. But back then you didn't. And so it was just like a very huge eye opener and stuff. And so when we first see him in season 2, he's walking the streets with a friend of his, like a teenage friend and stuff. Because he only, for the most part, hangs around the black people because he doesn't trust white people. And so, like, we see him take down, like, the drug dealer and stuff. And he makes the drug dealer, like, leave, like, his city and stuff, and he steals his money. So he's kind of like, he's a good-hearted natured man who just, like, screws up sometimes, because he sees, like, things in a different light. And but what part that where he screws up is that after he steals the money, he has his teenage friend go and hijack a car for some bizarre reason, which makes no sense because, like, his character does have money and tons of it, so why would he do this and everything? And so that just never made no sense to me. And so when his friend hijacked the car, he steals Charlie's car, which brings him into crosshairs with McLeod. McLeod has not seen him since the 1950s in Alabama. And so, like, when he steals the car, he wrecks it. And then he takes off on foot. And so then we get, like, the flashback of how him and McLeod met. And so, like, what was it? It was 1926 in Louisiana. And Carl is there with, like, 2 other black men. And they're about to be lynched by, like, a group of white men who's part of the Klan. And so, like, McLeod sees this and he runs over the platform which they're supposed to stand on. McLeod ends up getting shot, and Carl and the two men take off running. They manage to escape like the white men and stuff by like running through like the waters to take their scent off the trail of the hound dogs following them and stuff. It was some messed up times back then because black people were free in the 1920s and they still were treated like crap. And so you see why Carl was an angry man as he got like older and stuff and through the years and everything. And because it's kind of like this should never been like happening, but it was because other people allowed it because they were too scared until certain like laws got passed. And so um he meets up again. So like the clan people meet up with him again, and he's almost recaptured, but then McLeod saves him again. And McLeod, they start to like bond. And by this time, Carl has already been in Immortal. He's been in Immortal since the 1800s and stuff. And so McLeod asks him straight up, "What are you doing like in the South and everything? Like, why aren't you like living in like the North or like living in another country and stuff? Because because he said, lynching is still illegal, but tons of people still do it here." And he tells him, like, I think he had to go check up on something or something like that. So it was nice that he helped those men out, but at that same time, it's like, it made no sense as to why he was back in, like, the States, and especially, like, in the South. So then, at some point in time, McLeod in the present day finds, like, Carl and everything, and they talk. And Carl really doesn't want nothing to do with him and everything, which McLeod doesn't really understand why. Charlie, on the other hand, is pissed and goes to the police to like report Carl and stuff. And while Carl is in the police station, he is greeted by one nice cop and one hateful racist cop. And and Charlie can see that and everything. And this hateful cop is a very interesting man, Eugene Carter, who turns out to be a former Watcher and part of the Hunters. Now let me get into like the Watchers a little bit. Remember when I said season 2 introduced the Watchers and it became one of the best parts of the series? Watchers are mortal people. They are not immortal. They get assigned to immortals and they videotape their lives, especially when they fight with swords and take the quickening and everything. And so they can have a history of their lives and they hide and they live in secret. Immortals don't know about them until they actually do. Well, Carter and a group of Watchers decide to go renegade. They don't like the idea of immortals living forever and dictating what goes around the world and this and that. And so they are on a mission to murder as many immortals as they can. And so now that the cops are on like Carl's scent, he is now in trouble. So they start looking for his young friend that was with him. As McLeod and like Carl start talking, we get a flashback scene, this time in 1950s Alabama. Carl is now a baseball player. And he tells McLeod, like, man, he loves like playing baseball. He wants to strike out like Babe Ruth and everything and all this other stuff. And so like they're in a diner and a racist cop acts nasty towards them. Carl sees that there was a whites only sign and decides like, look, man, we just need to like go. I didn't read the sign like this and all this. And McLeod's like, no, like times are different and blah, blah, blah. So he beats up on the white cop. And Carl tells him, what you do that for, man? Like, you're just going to make it harder for my people whenever this white cop sees like another black person. And McLeod looks at a newspaper and is all like, no longer. Turns out the Supreme Court has ruled against segregation. And you're no longer allowed to treat like black people or any other race like crap. So Carl is now ecstatic. Now, this is back when the Supreme Court used to rule against good stuff before they went crazy in the head lately. I don't like that rule of the Supreme Court. They get to keep the job until like they like retire or die or get impeached. Like that's just messed up because we have now seen there's some crooked people in the Supreme Court. So anyways, Carl talks about how he has dreams of being like an advocate and like, being a politician and like all this other stuff. And when we see him in the present day in the 1990s, we see that he has been to college and everything, but he's still playing baseball. He has not become a politician. He hasn't fulfilled most of the dreams that he wanted to. And so like, um, McLeod is just kind of like, like, how come, like, you haven't, like, done this stuff already? You said you wanted to do it and you haven't changed it. And why did you still like this car? And pretty much he just keeps talking about how, like, the system is screwed up for, like, black people and stuff like that. And, and because it still is nowadays, like, it's weird. Like, we have way more freedom than we ever had, but we still get hunted down like dogs. Ahmaud Arbery is living proof of that. Like it's in the 2000s, and he pretty much got chased down by three white men and murdered and everything. And this is the 2000s, and this should not be happening in today's time. Well, in a way, at some point in time, Carl and Charlie meet back up again, and they have a heated debate. See, Carl looks down on Charlie because of his light colored skin and talking about how you're just like a white boy living in like a black man's body. And Charlie tells him, look, man, I've been through hatred and racism all my life and all this other stuff and stuff like that. Like, I'm just like you, just like my skin of black is like lighter than yours. Because Charlie is mixed with Italian and black. And Carl is just like dogging him. Now, this is something that sadly happens in black culture a lot, where you have like, say, more urban ghetto black people and versus the I guess you could call it like, black ghetto people and stuff. It's like, they both of them look down on each other. The non-ghetto ones don't like how like a lot of the ghetto ones like wear their pants down, talking certain slang, use slurs, get in trouble with like the law and all this other stuff. And the ghetto ones don't like that. The non ones are perceived as being like white and everything, or don't listen to their type of music and don't say this and don't say that. So they judge each other, which is quite a shame. But this happens in all races. Like you have white, like country redneck people, clashing with non-redneck people and stuff. And this happens with every race, and it really needs to stop. And people really need to come like together, and stuff like that. Just because you don't listen to a certain type of music, or you don't wear your pants a certain way, or you don't use racial slurs or slang, doesn't mean you're any less black. You know what I'm saying? And it's quite a shame. So, anyways, with this, at some point in time, the cop dude Carter meets up again with like Carl because they just got through beating up his friend. And so after he finds Carl, he runs him over with his car and he's ready to take his head with an axe. Some group of teenagers and adults see this and the cop like flees. Anyway, so he tells McLeod and McLeod talks to like the police, and Charlie dropped the charges because Carl gave him the drug money that he stole from that dude to get his car fixed. And so he talks to this one cop because this one cop, remember I said there's a good cop, he stopped Carter from beating up and killing that teenage boy. And so him and McLeod talk to this cop and tell him like, look man, your partner's like racist and everything, which he knows, and he needs to be stopped and this and that. So Carl and Carter meet up, and Carl's looking to kill, not Carl, but Carter's looking to kill Carl and everything, until McLeod like drops him in like the ocean and stuff like that. And so that was a weird episode, and it ended in a weird way, but it ended with McLeod and Carl being on good terms and everything. But then we get into I think it was called Wanted Man or something like that. Or I think that's what the episode is called in season 4. And in season 4, this is where things like take like a weird, no, I think it's called manhunt. That's it, manhunt in season 4. This is where things take a different turn. We see Carl and he's still playing baseball and everything. Now this is set I think in '96 now, as the other one was set in like a couple of years earlier. He's happy, he's cheerful, he's signing autograph with his fans and all this other stuff. Well, as he's about to leave, he senses an immortal. Just some regular dude wants to take his head. He tells, look, man, we don't need to do this and everything. There are people around, because you're not supposed to be spotted by like the public and everything, because nobody knows about immortals. The young immortal doesn't care. They fight. Carl takes his head. Boom, the quickening happens. But the immortal dude body falls down to the ground. And what happens? They see Carl by his body. And so now Carl is wanted for manslaughter. And even though they didn't see him take the dude's head and they don't have the murder weapon, they think he did it just because he was there near the dude and because he's black. So messed up. And so Carl is now on the run, and he has one of his young fans like meet up with McCloud and give him a note. When McCloud finds Carl, McCloud's demeanor towards him is odd. It's almost like McCloud is smug and doesn't really want to have nothing to do with him and stuff. And it's weird because the last episode in season 2, they left on good terms. But McCloud is acting kind of weird towards him for some bizarre reason. And so he tells him, no, look, man, I need your help and this and that. And he's all like, look, man, you know our ways and everything. You've been found out. You need to leave and everything. And Carl's like, no, man, I can't leave. Like, I'm famous. I have all this money. And I can't get to my money because as soon as I go to the ATM, they're going to nab me and stuff. And so McCloud said he'll help him. But McCloud, like I said before, is acting kind of weird. And so we get that flashback from season 2 when they first met and everything. And so, like I said before, it's almost like a soft, like, reboot and stuff. And so then we get like the introduction of Matthew McCormick. And Matthew McCormick, he's played by, I think his name is Eric McCormack from Will and Grace. And so like it's weird seeing him younger here. And so like I'm trying to think of the dude's name who plays, I think it's Bruce Young, I think his name is, who plays Carl. I never said that. But he's from the Sentinel. Remember that from UPN? And so McCormick, he's an immortal, and he senses Carl. And those two have history. So now we get back into how Carl became an immortal. Now, Carl was born in 1824, but in 1859, when he was a slave, his slave owner named Herbert came with his daughter. His daughter was pregnant. She got knocked up by a slave. So she just started pointing fingers, and she pointed at Carl. Now, of course, Carl didn't do anything. Now, here's the thing about immortality. Carl can still have kids while he's still human, mortal. But as soon as he becomes immortal, he's no longer to have kids, and he no longer ages, and he can't die unless you take his head. Now, this is how immortality works. Not everybody is immortal, only certain people. And you can only become immortal when you die of a tragic death. If you die of old age, then it won't work. And if you know what immortals are and you expect it to come, then you will not be triggered into becoming an immortal. It only gets triggered when you die a violent death. So the slave owner runs him down and shoots him in the back, killing him. He wakes up. And when he wakes up, he doesn't understand what's going on, how he became like living and everything, but he hides out. And as he's eating, he's found by some slave catchers and stuff. They take him in chains, and then here comes Matthew McCormick. He knows who Carl is and has been sensing him for months because he's dating his slave owner's daughter. and he's married to her and stuff. So he's like the son-in-law of the slave owner. And so he buys Carl and then he frees him and everything. And so then he teaches him his ways, how to like fight with a sword and everything about being immortal. But he tells Carl straight up, leave Herbert alone and everything. And Carl's like, nah, man, I got some business to take care of him. And he's all like, look, man, I freed you. I taught you our ways. I am his son-in-law. Like, just put your revenge against him alone and just leave. But how can Carl do that after Carl was a slave? Like, how do you expect him to do that? So, of course, Carl goes back and he murders that man. And he murders his son because the son comes out trying to kill him. Now, this is one thing that's always been shocking to me. In the first episode Carl appeared in season 2, they used the N word. Like, they actually use it. And in this episode, they use it about 3 times. I was very shocked and surprised to hear that. Because this is TV, and this was in the 90s before black people started, once again, making that word popular. Now, if you know me, I hate the N word, period. Nobody has the right to use it whatsoever. I don't care what race you are. It's a word that needs to just be like abolished and everything, because it causes more harm than it does good. And so anyways, I was very shocked and surprised they used this. Now, this show is in syndication, so that's probably one reason why they were able to get rid of it. Plus, it has to do with slavery. And normally when it's like a slave episode, you tend to hear that in movies and TV shows. And so, because I remember there was another show called Sirens, and Star Trek Will Wheaton, who played Wesley Crusher, he got started on that, and he called a black cop that N-word. I was like, oh my God, Wesley Crusher's a racist and stuff. So yeah. So after that, so after killing that slave owner dude and his son, McCormick has took this as a betrayal and now wants the head of Carl. But here's the thing. 200 something years and he never tracked that man down and fought him. So that doesn't make no sense. And he known who Carl is because Carl is one of those type of immortals like Duncan MacLeod. He never changes his name throughout the years. So, which is kind of weird because how do people, because people still assume that, okay, Carl Robinson's a black baseball player from the 1950s and is still a baseball player in the 1990s. So that's a weird coincidence. But he's never tracked that man down. He just left him alone until Carl became like a murder suspect. Now, all of a sudden, he wants to track him down. And so, like, McLeod and... Because this is what happened. So at some point, Carl does get arrested and everything. But then all of a sudden, somebody confesses to the murder. And that's weird. A man named Terry Franks confesses to the murder. Now, Terry Franks is a coach for the baseball team that Carl plays on. And so, so it's weird because, like, why did he confess to this murder? But Carl doesn't care. He's like, well, that's good for me and everything. Now, this is the part where Carl's demeanor has changed. He didn't act that way in season 2. In season 2, he just hated white people because of what happened to him. But now it's kind of like he's going to let an innocent man go to jail for murder and stuff. And he's all like, whatever, man. I still get to keep my money. I still get to be a baseball player and this and that. And McLeod's all like, look, you can't let him go to prison and everything for like your murder. And like he understands, like, you know, the reason why you murdered this dude is just what we do, but you can't let him take the fall for this. And Carl's like, look, man, I'm black and America's always against me and this and that. And he tells Carl, like, what are you talking about? Like, you're rich, you live in a mansion, you have a really nice car, so you know you're not like other struggling like black people. And not only that, but you kept talking about how you were going to change the system, but you never did that. Instead, you just played baseball and stuff. So they get into like a really huge fight, which McLeod ends up beating him, and Carl's like, all right, fine, like whatever, I give up. And so like they go down to the police station to talk to Terry, and Terry tells Carl that, you know, look, man, I'm not smart. I'm washed up. I'm trash. And many years ago, I used to hate your kind. I used to hate rich people, and I used to hate black people. And I've done some like terrible things in my past. And but you have like a future and everything. You are educated. You are famous, and you can help change the world where I can't and everything. Just let me wallow away in prison. This touches Carl to where Carl's just kind of like he realized he can't let Terry do this, and he tells Terry because even though Carl has called Terry like trash and everything, he realized and tell him, "Look, man, you're not like you're still a human being and all this other stuff." So McLeod talks to McCormick. McCormick still wants to take the head of Carl, and he tries to. They about to get into a huge fight with swords. McLeod stops him and he tells him, "Look, man, what happened over 200 years ago. You know how like our lives are and everything, and you need to like let it go and everything." That was like they were slave owners, for crying out loud and stuff. Now at some point in time when I said McLeod's behavior had changed, I forgot to mention that McLeod even told Carl, "You should have left that slave owner alone," and just like left. And it's kind of like, seriously, McLeod don't know what it's like to be a slave, and it's like he would have done the same thing. And in fact, McLeod has had a dark past in his history where he started murdering innocent people from a rival like country he didn't like and stuff. So McLeod ain't necessarily innocent and stuff. And so it's just kind of weird that McLeod's all like, "Oh man, just let it go and everything. You must forgive people." How are you gonna forgive a slave owner? Like seriously, you know what I'm saying? And so that was just what was weird about McLeod's personality in this episode. So in a way, all three men come up with a ruse to help Carl out. Carl is now going to have to leave his life behind. It's just the way immortals do. When they get found out, they have to rebuild and everything. And so he's going to have to rebuild. And he doesn't want to have to rebuild his life, but he's going to have to now. So that's just part of what comes with being an immortal. It gets found out. So, because now, well, it made it seem like the cops have showed up to Carl. McLeod tried to talk to him. It doesn't work. Carl tries to shoot at the cops. They shoot and kill him. And then he gets sent to the morgue. There, McCormick and McLeod get him out of the morgue and they send him on his merry way. But not before he talks to Terry. He tells Terry, "Look, man, don't try to figure this out. Just know that I'm alive and you won't be seeing me no more." But he thanks him for being his friend and stuff like that. And so we find out that many years later, Carl has ended up in Trinidad where he teaches like the little league baseball team and stuff. And so like, does he have all his money? Not really sure, but at least he's no longer a fugitive in America. And at some point, he will rebuild his life and get his money back because all he has to do is say he's the descendant of Carl Robinson and everything. And, like I said before, Carl is a very interesting character. He's not necessarily a bad man. He's good in nature. It's just things don't always go his way. And just like how it is with a lot of black people, things just don't go our way. And we get put down by like the system and like people who like hold us down and stuff. And then but what was weird about Carl is that, like I said before, his personality kind of changed. It's almost like it's a soft reboot and stuff. And it's kind of weird because Carl had like just like McLeod said, he had the means to make the system different, to change things, and for some reason he never did. And just like with tons of black people, we have got to vote. We have got to vote the right way. We cannot vote for like people who are not going to help us out, all because we're scared of high like taxes and this and that, or if a woman's going to run and this and that. Because so many black men sadly don't want to vote because they think the system's always against them, and they're like, well, who cares who wins because we're still going to get put down. You're only going to keep getting put down if you keep siding with the people and don't do nothing, and you're gonna get put down and stuff. If you don't make change happen, then change will never happen. It can't happen on its own. You have to put your foot forward and stand up and let your voice be heard and everything, which makes me so happy when I see people protesting out in the streets for black injustice and stuff, or protesting online. I don't care how people protest, just protest some kind of way. it always bugs me when you see these high profile celebrities who are like black and they don't put their foot forward. They don't protest. They don't protest in person. They don't protest online. They don't vote. And it's just kind of like because they don't care because they're rich and they don't have to deal with stuff, you know? And that's like very annoying. And it's like I said before, like all the other people who are black but don't look black because they're mixed with white or their ancestry and stuff. Um, it's kind of like, let's hear from you, you know what I'm saying? Like, stand up for half of your race when you see them getting gunned down and stuff. Don't just keep quiet and continue to play those like white roles and everything. Like, let your voice be heard. And because like just like with the Charlie character, he's half black, half Italian, and he's been through prejudice and racism his whole life from both like all races and stuff. Because that's the sad thing about biracial people is that they feel like they don't have a place in this world because they get looked down on by both sides of their races, and it really needs to stop and everything. Happy Black History Month, everybody. I'll talk to you later. Bye.